The stone chamber echoed with the chants of the 5 elders, their voices rising in a rhythmic condemnation that made Zoe's knees buckle. She'd been dragged from her tiny servant's quarters at dawn, still wearing her threadbare nightdress, her bare feet scraping against the cold marble as 2 guards hauled her before the Council of Ancients. The sacred blood pool gleamed crimson in the torchlight behind them, its surface rippling with ancient power that had been forbidden to all but the purest bloodlines for 1,000 years. Zoey Thorne, you stand accused of the gravest sin our pack has ever witnessed, Elder Matthias announced, his weathered face carved into lines of disgust. You, a lowly Omega servant with no wolf, no lineage, no value to this pack whatsoever, dared to enter the Alpha King's private chambers uninvited. Zoe's breath came in sharp gasps. I was cleaning. I was ordered to clean the East Wing. I had permission from the head housekeeper. Lies, Elder Tabitha hissed, her silver hair catching the firelight. You were found in his bedchamber, touching his personal belongings, going through his private letters. The head housekeeper never assigned you to that wing. You went there with malicious intent. No, that's not true. Madame Cordelia told me. Madame Cordelia died 3 months ago, you stupid girl, one of the guards sneered. You're not even clever enough to use a believable excuse. The crowd of pack members gathered in the observation gallery above began to murmur, their voices rising in agreement. Zoe's eyes darted upward, searching desperately for a single friendly face, but found only contempt and satisfaction. These were the same wolves who had ordered her around for 5 years, who had treated her like she was less than dirt, who had laughed when she'd been publicly humiliated time and again for having no wolf to call forth. The punishment for such transgression is clear, Elder Matthias continued, his staff striking the ground with a resounding crack. You will be submerged in the sacred blood pool until your worthless human lungs give out. The pool will reject your tainted essence as it rejects all who are unworthy. Your death will serve as a reminder to all servants of their place. Please, I'm telling the truth. Zoe's voice cracked as the guards began dragging her toward the pool's edge. I didn't do anything wrong. Someone set me up. Please listen to me. They always beg, one guard muttered to the other. Makes it more entertaining. The heat radiating from the blood pool intensified as they hauled her closer. Ancient wolf blood, collected over centuries from the strongest alphas who had ever lived, swirled in hypnotic patterns. Legend said it could burn through flesh in seconds, that only those of purest bloodline could even stand near it without their skin blistering. Zoe had scrubbed the chamber floors for years, always staying far from its edge, always feeling its power pressing against her like a physical weight. Any last words? Elder Tabitha asked with a cruel smile. Zoe's mind raced. 5 years ago, she'd arrived at the Silver Moon Pack territory as a refugee, her parents dead from a rogue attack, her wolf dormant or perhaps non-existent. The pack had taken her in only because ancient law required them to shelter lone wolves, but they'd made her pay for that mercy every single day. She'd cleaned their toilets, scrubbed their floors, endured their cruelty, all while hoping that one day her wolf would emerge and prove she wasn't worthless. But her wolf had never come, and now she would die for a crime she didn't commit. I'm innocent, she whispered. That's all I have to say. I'm innocent, and you're murdering me anyway. Throw her in, Elder Matthias ordered. The guards lifted her by her arms and legs, swinging her once, twice, and then she was airborne, her scream cutting off as she plunged into the sacred blood pool. The impact drove every bit of air from her lungs. The blood was hot, searingly hot, but not burning the way she'd expected. It was thick, viscous, pulling at her limbs as she instinctively tried to swim upward. But the guards held long poles, pushing her down every time her head neared the surface, their laughter echoing in the chamber above. Her chest began to burn. The need for air became overwhelming. She clawed at the poles, at the blood itself, but everything was slipping through her fingers. The red darkness pressed in from all sides, and she could hear her own heartbeat slowing, feel her body beginning to surrender. This was it. This was how she died. Alone, accused of crimes she didn't commit, drowned in sacred blood that should have rejected her instantly. But then something changed. The blood began to move differently, not swirling around her, but flowing toward her, into her. Through her skin, through her pores, through every opening. It poured into her mouth when she gasped involuntarily, down her throat, filling her lungs, and instead of drowning, she felt something ignite deep in her chest. Power. Raw, ancient, overwhelming power. Her eyes snapped open in the crimson depths, and she could see. Not just vague shapes, but everything. Every ripple, every particle of ancient essence that made up this sacred pool. And all of it was rushing toward her, being absorbed into her body like water into parched earth. The pool began to glow, brighter and brighter until the red light pierced through to the chamber above, causing shouts of alarm from the gathered crowd. "What's happening?" one guard yelled, dropping his pole. "The pool, it's draining. It's all going into her." Zoey felt her feet touch the bottom of the pool as the level dropped rapidly. The blood continued flowing into her skin, her bones, her very DNA, rewriting everything she'd ever been. Her wolf, dormant for 23 years, suddenly surged to the surface of her consciousness. Not small or weak, but massive, powerful, radiating silver light. And then she felt it, the knowledge flooding her mind along with the power. The blood pool hadn't just been a collection of alpha essence. It had been blessed by the moon goddess herself, imbued with immortality for the one true heir who would be worthy to absorb it. Every pack for 1,000 years had guarded it, waiting for the prophesied Luna who would come to claim her birthright. They'd thrown that Luna into the pool to drown her. The last drop of blood sank into Zoey's skin, and she stood in the empty basin, her nightdress plastered to her body, her hair hanging in wet ropes around her face. But her eyes glowed with silver fire. The power thrumming through her veins made the air itself vibrate. She looked up at the stunned faces staring down at her. "Get me out of this pool," she said, her voice resonating with newfound strength. "Now!" The guards scrambled to lower a ladder, their hands shaking. Every wolf in the chamber could feel it now, the overwhelming alpha presence radiating from the girl they'd tried to murder. The same girl they'd treated like garbage for 5 years. Zoey climbed out slowly, deliberately, letting them all see what they'd created. Water dripped from her clothes, but her skin was unmarked, perfect, glowing with an inner light. She could feel the immortality settling into her cells, feel her body becoming something more than human, more than wolf, something eternal. This is impossible," Elder Matthias breathed, his staff clattering from his nerveless fingers. "The pool should have killed you. You're nothing. You're nobody." I'm the prophesied Luna, Zoey said simply. The one your precious legends speak of. The one you just tried to murder. The massive doors to the chamber burst open with a crash that made everyone jump. Alpha King Achilles strode in, his massive frame radiating barely controlled fury. He was legendary throughout all the packs, the most powerful alpha in 3 centuries, a warrior who'd united the Western territories through strength and strategy. His dark hair was disheveled as if he'd dressed in a hurry, his golden eyes blazing as they swept the scene. What the hell is going on here? His voice dropped to a lethal quiet as he took in Zoey's wet form, the empty pool, the terrified elders. Why was I not informed of a council trial? Your Majesty, we found this servant in your chambers, Elder Tabitha stammered. We were merely carrying out traditional punishment for... You were murdering someone in my name without my knowledge or consent, Achilles snarled, his alpha command rolling through the chamber with such force that several wolves in the gallery dropped to their knees. Explain. Quickly. Elder Matthias cleared his throat. The girl, Zoey Thorne, was discovered in your private bedchamber going through your personal correspondence. Such violation of an Alpha King's privacy has always been punished by... I gave her permission to be there. The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to the Alpha King. I asked Zoey 3 days ago to organize my study, Achilles continued, his gaze locked on the elders. My personal letters were in disarray, and I needed someone I could trust to sort them by date and importance. She's been working in the castle for 5 years and has never once given me reason to doubt her integrity. But the head housekeeper said, Elder Tabitha sputtered. The head housekeeper who died 3 months ago? That head housekeeper? Achilles' tone could have frozen fire. You didn't even bother to verify your accusation before attempting an execution? Zoey's breath caught. He'd defended her. The Alpha King, who barely knew she existed, had just publicly declared his trust in her. But why would he? Her enhanced senses, newly awakened by the blood pool's power, suddenly picked up something she'd never noticed before. A scent. Achilles' scent. Pine and mountain snow and something wild that made her wolf surge forward with recognition. Mate. Oh gods. The Alpha King was her mate, and judging by the way his eyes had locked onto hers, by the way his entire body had gone rigid when she'd climbed from the pool, he'd just realized it too. Everyone out, Achilles commanded. Except Zoey and the 5 elders. The rest of you, leave. Now. The chamber emptied in seconds, pack members scrambling over each other to escape the Alpha King's wrath. The doors boomed shut, leaving only 7 people in the vast space. Achilles moved toward Zoey with deliberate steps, his eyes never leaving her face. When he stood before her, he slowly removed his jacket and draped it around her shoulders, covering her wet nightdress. The gesture was protective, possessive, and unmistakably claiming. Are you hurt? His voice had gentled completely, meant only for her. No, I don't think so. Zoey pulled his jacket tighter, overwhelmed by his nearness, by the mate bond singing between them. The pool, it didn't kill me, It chose you, Achilles finished. The sacred blood pool has been waiting 1,000 years for its true Luna. Every legend, every prophecy, they all spoke of this moment. He turned to face the elders, and his expression hardened back into fury. You 5 attempted to execute my mate, he said, each word dropping like a stone. the prophesied Luna, the only wolf in a millennium worthy of absorbing the sacred blood. You tried to murder her based on a false accusation you didn't even bother to verify. We didn't know. There was no way to, Elder Matthias began. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. Achilles' alpha command exploded through the chamber, driving all 5 elders to their knees. For 5 years, you've watched this woman work herself to exhaustion, serving a pack that treated her like filth. 5 years, she's cleaned your messes, endured your cruelty, suffered your contempt, and not once did any of you see her value. Not once did you consider that perhaps the moon goddess had sent her to us for a reason. Zoey's throat tightened with emotion. Every word he spoke was true. Every day had been a battle to maintain her dignity while being treated as worthless. Zoey. Achilles turned back to her, his expression softening. The choice is yours. These 5 elders attempted to murder you. By our laws, you have the right to demand their execution, their exile, or any punishment you deem fit. The elders' faces went white. Zoey looked at each of them in turn, at Elder Matthias, who had called her worthless, at Elder Tabitha, who had smiled while ordering her death, at the 3 others who had stood silent and complicit. Part of her wanted to demand the harshest punishment, to make them suffer as they'd made her suffer. But another part of her, the part that had absorbed centuries of alpha wisdom along with the sacred blood, understood something deeper. I want them stripped of their positions on the council, she said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. I want public acknowledgement of what they did, and a formal apology to be recorded in pack history. And I want them to serve 1 year doing the same work I did, cleaning, serving, being treated the way they treated others, so they understand the value of every pack member, regardless of status. A wise judgment, Achilles said, admiration clear in his voice. It will be done. Guards! The doors opened immediately, and 4 guards entered, snapping to attention. Escort these former elders to the servant quarters. They are to begin their year of service immediately. Anyone who shows them deference will answer to me personally. As the guards led the stumbling elders away, Zoey's legs suddenly buckled. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation was fading, and the enormity of what had happened crashed over her all at once. She'd almost died. She'd absorbed the sacred blood pool. She'd discovered her mate. Everything had changed in less than an hour. Achilles caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her easily into his arms. Easy. The transformation takes a toll. He carried her toward the door, moving with careful gentleness. I'm taking you to my private quarters. You'll need rest, food, and time to adjust to your new power. But I'm just a servant. I can't. You're my mate, Achilles interrupted, his arms tightening around her. You're the prophesied Luna. You're immortal now, Zoey, and you're under my protection. No one will ever hurt you again. The sincerity in his voice made tears spring to her eyes. For 5 years, she'd survived on nothing but hope that someday things would get better. She'd never imagined they would change this dramatically. Why did you tell them you'd asked me to organize your study? Was that true? Achilles' jaw tightened as he carried her through the castle corridors, pack members scrambling out of their way and bowing low as they passed. No, but 3 days ago, I watched you in the courtyard helping a young pup who'd fallen and scraped his knee. You were gentle with him, patient, kind, even though his mother had been particularly cruel to you just that morning. I realized then that you possess something rare, genuine compassion even in the face of constant mistreatment. He looked down at her, his golden eyes intense. I'd been planning to find a way to elevate your position, to give you better treatment. I never imagined you'd turn out to be my mate. But I'm grateful the moon goddess is wiser than I am. They reached his chambers, and he shouldered open the massive oak door. The room was exactly as Zoey remembered from her brief, fateful cleaning session. Expansive, elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the packlands. He laid her carefully on the enormous bed, pulling thick furs over her. Rest now. I'll have food brought up, and the pack doctor will examine you to ensure the transformation completed properly. Achilles, wait! Zoey caught his hand before he could step away. The mate bond. I can feel it, but we barely know each other. And I was nobody. I don't know how to be a Luna, or a queen, or... He sat on the edge of the bed, his large hand enveloping hers completely. We have time to learn each other, Zoey. The mate bond doesn't require instant perfection. It requires willingness to try. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. And you were never nobody. The pack's blindness doesn't determine your worth. You survived 5 years of cruelty without becoming cruel yourself. That's the mark of true strength. What happens now? Now you heal. You adjust to your new power, and we'll figure out the rest together. Over the following weeks, Zoey discovered that adjusting to immortality and newfound power was far more complicated than she'd imagined. Her wolf, finally free after years of dormancy, was massive, nearly as large as Achilles' alpha wolf, with fur that shimmered silver in the moonlight. The sacred blood had enhanced every aspect of her being. Her senses were razor sharp. Her strength exceeded that of most alphas, and she healed from injuries almost instantly. But power and immortality couldn't prepare her for the social battlefield of pack politics. Lady Isadora Blackthorn had been the presumed future Luna for 3 years. She was beautiful, sophisticated, from an ancient bloodline, and utterly furious that a former servant had stolen her position. She couldn't challenge Zoey directly, not with Achilles' protection and the undeniable proof of the sacred blood pool's choice, but she could make Zoey's life miserable in 1,000 subtle ways. "Oh, Zoey, darling, you're wearing that dress to the council dinner?" Isadora's voice dripped false concern as she intercepted Zoey in the corridor outside the ballroom. "It's just that it's so servant plain. I suppose old habits die hard, don't they?" Zoey looked down at her simple blue gown. The pack seamstress had made it for her, assuring her it was appropriate for formal occasions. But now, seeing Isadora in shimmering emerald silk with elaborate jeweled embroidery, she felt instantly inadequate. The seamstress said, "Oh, sweetie, the seamstress makes servant uniforms. She wouldn't know true fashion if it bit her." Isadora's laugh was musical and cruel. "Don't worry, though. Everyone already knows you're out of your depth. One more fashion disaster won't change their minds." She swept past, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume and Zoey's crumbling confidence in her wake. The council dinner was worse. Zoey sat beside Achilles at the high table, hyper-aware of every eye on her, every whispered comment. When she reached for her wineglass, with her left hand instead of her right, she heard the gasps. When she used the wrong fork for her salad, she saw the smirks. She was drowning in social rules she'd never been taught, expectations she couldn't meet. "Breathe," Achilles murmured, his hand finding hers under the table. "You're doing fine." I used the fish fork for my salad. Half the people in this room wouldn't know a fish fork from a serving spoon if their lives depended on it. They're following your lead, not judging your technique. But he was wrong. They were judging. Isadora made sure of it. It must be so overwhelming for Zoey, having to learn everything from scratch, Isadora announced to the table, her voice carrying perfectly. I mean, we're all born into these traditions, raised with this etiquette. But for someone who spent 5 years scrubbing floors, she let the sentence hang delicately. We should all be patient with her as she learns. The pity in her tone was more damaging than any insult. Several council members nodded sympathetically, looking at Zoey like she was a charity case. Achilles' hand tightened on hers, his jaw clenched. But before he could speak, Zoey stood, drawing every eye in the room. You're right, Isadora. I did spend 5 years scrubbing floors. I also spent those 5 years observing every single person in this pack while they thought I was invisible. She let her gaze sweep the room, her newfound confidence surprising even herself. I watched who was kind when they thought no one important was looking. I saw who treated servants with respect and who treated them like garbage. I learned more about true character in those 5 years than most people learn in a lifetime of formal dinners and etiquette lessons. The room had gone completely silent. So yes, I might use the wrong fork sometimes. I might not know all your elaborate social rules. But I know what matters. Compassion, integrity, and respecting every member of this pack, regardless of their status. She looked directly at Isadora. Some lessons are worth more than perfect table manners. Achilles stood beside her, radiating pride and alpha command. My mate speaks wisdom, he announced. Perhaps this council would benefit from less focus on which fork to use and more focus on how we treat our people. Dinner is concluded. As the council members filed out, Isadora's expression had transformed from smug satisfaction to barely concealed rage. She'd wanted to humiliate Zoey, but instead, Zoey had turned the moment into a demonstration of strength. But Zoey knew this wasn't over. Isadora wouldn't give up her ambitions easily. She was proven right 2 weeks later when disaster struck. Zoey had been working with the pack healer, learning to control her new immortal powers, when a young warrior burst into the healing room. Luna, Zoey! There's been an accident. A training exercise went wrong. 3 warriors are trapped under a collapsed obstacle course. We can't lift the debris fast enough, and they're running out of air. Zoey didn't hesitate. She ran toward the training grounds, her enhanced speed carrying her across the packlands in seconds. By the time she arrived, a crowd had gathered around the massive pile of wooden beams and metal weights that had crashed down during advanced combat training. My son is under there! A woman grabbed Zoey's arm, tears streaming down her face. Please, please help him! Achilles was already there, along with 20 warriors trying to lift the debris, but it was too heavy, too unstable. One wrong move, and the whole thing would collapse further, crushing the trapped wolves. It's not working, Achilles growled, his muscles bulging as he tried to lift a main support beam. We need more leverage. I can do it, Zoey said, pushing forward. The sacred blood made me strong enough. She positioned herself under the largest beam, the one pinning all the others in place. Taking a deep breath, she channeled the power flowing through her veins, feeling her immortal strength surge to the surface. And then she lifted. The beam rose, slowly at first, then faster as she adjusted her grip. Achilles and the other warriors stared in shock as Zoey single-handedly lifted what 30 wolves couldn't move together, holding it steady while the trapped warriors were pulled free. When the last wolf was clear, she lowered the beam carefully and stepped back, breathing hard but uninjured. The crowd erupted in cheers. The mother whose son had been rescued threw her arms around Zoey, sobbing with gratitude. Warriors who'd looked at her with doubt days ago now looked at her with respect. "That was incredible," Achilles said, pulling her into his arms. "You just saved 3 lives." "I wasn't sure I could do it." Zoey's hands were shaking now with the aftermath of adrenaline. "But I had to try." "You didn't hesitate. You didn't second-guess yourself, you just acted." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "That's what makes you a true Luna, Zoey. Not perfect table manners or elaborate gowns. The willingness to risk yourself for your pack." From the edge of the crowd, Isadora watched with narrowed eyes, her expression calculating. If she'd hoped that public events would expose Zoey's unworthiness, her plan had backfired spectacularly. Zoey wasn't just accepted now. She was respected, which meant Isadora would need to escalate. That escalation came during the Harvest Moon Festival, the pack's most important celebration of the year. It was Zoey's first public event as official Luna, and despite Achilles' constant reassurance, her nerves were stretched thin. She'd been preparing for weeks, memorizing pack lineages, learning ceremonial protocols, practicing the traditional Luna blessing that she would need to perform at midnight. The festival grounds glowed with thousands of lanterns. Pack members from all territories had gathered, along with visiting alphas from neighboring packs. This was Zoey's debut to the wider wolf community, her chance to prove herself as worthy of her position. Everything was perfect until Zoey took her first sip of ceremonial wine. The poison hit her system like liquid fire, not enough to kill an immortal, but enough to cause excruciating pain and complete humiliation. Her vision blurred. Her coordination vanished. Within minutes, she was stumbling, slurring her words, appearing drunk before hundreds of witnesses. "Zoey, what's wrong?" Achilles caught her as she swayed. Something's wrong." The words wouldn't come out right. Her tongue felt thick, her thoughts scattered. She could hear the gasps, the whispers, the judgment. "Is the Luna drunk? At her own formal debut?" I knew she wasn't ready for this position. Isadora appeared at Achilles' side, her face a perfect mask of concern. "Oh no, poor Zoey. The pressure must have been too much for her." She addressed the crowd with sympathetic authority. "She's not accustomed to formal events. Perhaps she didn't realize how strong the ceremonial wine is." "I only had 1 sip," Zoey tried to protest, but her words came out garbled, making her sound even more intoxicated. "Everyone back to your celebrations," Achilles ordered, his alpha command brooking no argument. "The Luna needs to rest." He swept Zoey into his arms, carrying her away from the festival grounds, while sympathetic murmurs and disappointed whispers followed them. In his chambers, he laid her on the bed and immediately called for the pack healer. The elderly healer, Maeve, examined Zoey with practiced efficiency, testing her blood and sniffing the ceremonial cup that Achilles had brought from the festival. "Moonsbane extract," Maeve announced, her voice heavy with implications. "Mixed with wine, it mimics intoxication in wolves while causing severe pain. It was deliberately added to the Luna's cup." "Someone poisoned her." Achilles' voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "Someone poisoned my mate at her own celebration." "Who would?" Zoey tried to sit up, but Maeve gently pushed her back down. Rest, child. Your immortality is protecting you from the worst effects, but you'll need several hours to metabolize the poison fully. As Zoey drifted into an uncomfortable sleep, her last thought was of Isadora's perfectly timed appearance, her sympathetic explanation that had shaped the crowd's perception. This hadn't been a random act. This had been calculated sabotage. She was proven right the next morning when Achilles' investigation revealed the truth. A servant had been paid to switch Zoe's ceremonial cup, paid by an intermediary who was traced back to Isadora's personal accounts. The evidence was undeniable. Achilles called an emergency council meeting, his fury barely contained. Lady Isadora Blackthorn, you are charged with attempted poisoning of the Luna and deliberate sabotage of a sacred ceremony. Isadora stood before the council, her composure cracking for the first time. This is ridiculous! I would never— The financial records prove otherwise. The servant confessed. The poison was purchased using your family's accounts. Achilles' eyes glowed with his wolf's rage. You attempted to humiliate and harm my mate because you couldn't accept that she was chosen over you. She doesn't deserve to be Luna. She's a nobody, a servant. I was supposed to— I earned my position, Zoey interrupted, stepping forward. The poison had burned through her system overnight, leaving her stronger than before. The sacred blood pool chose me. The moon goddess herself blessed me, and I've proven my worth every single day since. She turned to address the council. Isadora's jealousy nearly destroyed an entire sacred festival. Her actions disrespected our traditions, endangered my life, and showed complete disregard for pack unity. Zoey met Isadora's furious gaze steadily. I want her exiled, not executed. I won't have that on my conscience. But she cannot remain in this pack, where she poses a continuing threat. The council voted unanimously. By sunset, Isadora Blackthorn was escorted to the pack borders and cast out, her family's protests overruled by the evidence of her crimes. As Zoey watched her leave, Achilles came to stand beside her, his hand finding hers. You showed her mercy when you could have demanded her death. Mercy isn't weakness, it's strength. Zoey leaned into his warmth. And I want to be a Luna who leads with strength and compassion, not fear and vengeance. You already are. He turned her to face him, his golden eyes intense. Zoey, these past weeks, watching you grow into your power, watching you face every challenge with grace and courage, I've fallen completely in love with you. Her breath caught. Achilles. I know the mate bond connected us, but this is more than that. This is choosing you every single day because of who you are. He dropped to one knee, pulling a ring from his pocket, a band of silver with a moonstone that glowed with inner light. Zoey Thorne, prophesied Luna, my mate, my partner. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. Yes! Yes, 1,000 times yes! He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, the pack had gathered, having witnessed the proposal. Their cheers echoed across the territory. The wedding took place at the next full moon, a ceremony that combined ancient tradition with Zoey's own modern touches. She walked down the aisle in a gown that shimmered like starlight, her immortal power making her literally glow. Achilles waited at the altar in traditional ceremonial garb, his eyes never leaving her face. The pack priest bound their hands with silver cord and spoke the ancient vows. Before the moon goddess and this pack, do you, Achilles, Alpha King of the Silver Moon Pack, take Zoey as your Luna, your mate, your equal in all things. I do, now and forever. And do you, Zoey, prophesied Luna, chosen of the sacred blood, take Achilles as your Alpha, your mate, your partner in leading this pack? I do, with all my heart. When they kissed to seal their union, the mate bond between them flared visible to every wolf present, a silver thread of pure power connecting their souls. The pack erupted in howls of celebration. The months that followed were filled with change. Zoey implemented new policies protecting lower-ranking pack members, ensuring that no one would be treated the way she'd been treated. She established training programs to help wolves develop their abilities regardless of bloodline. She worked tirelessly alongside Achilles to build a pack culture based on merit and compassion rather than tradition and cruelty. And then, one morning, she woke with new knowledge singing through her blood. Achilles, I'm pregnant! He'd been reviewing territory maps at his desk, but at her words, he dropped everything and crossed to her in 2 strides. Are you certain? The sacred blood, it tells me things. Now, I can feel our child growing. And Achilles. She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. Our baby is powerful. More powerful than any wolf born in centuries. He's going to be something extraordinary. Like his mother. Achilles kissed her softly. We'll give him everything. Love, guidance, strength. He'll grow up knowing his worth isn't determined by what others think, but by who he chooses to be. 9 months later, their son was born during a full moon, his first cries strong and commanding. They named him Phoenix, a symbol of rebirth and transformation. From his first moments, it was clear he'd inherited both his mother's immortal strength and his father's alpha power. His eyes glowed silver and gold alternately, and the pack healer confirmed that he was the strongest wolf pup ever recorded in pack history. As Zoey held her son, watching Achilles lean over them both with such fierce love and protection, she thought back to that terrible day when she'd been dragged before the council. The day she'd been thrown into the sacred blood pool to die. The day that had transformed her entire existence. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the elders hadn't tried to kill me? If we'd never discovered what I was? We would have found each other anyway. The mate bond was always there, Zoey. I was already falling for you before the pool chose you. Achilles brushed his fingers over Phoenix's tiny hand. But I'm grateful for how it happened, because you needed to discover your strength. You needed to know your worth wasn't given to you by anyone else. You earned it, claimed it, made it yours. The cruelty I endured made me who I am. It taught me resilience, compassion, the value of every person regardless of status. She looked up at her mate, her alpha, the love of her life. Sometimes the worst moments forge the strongest. Steel. And you're the strongest person I've ever known. Phoenix stirred in her arms, his tiny face scrunching in a way that made both parents smile. Their son, their future. The beginning of a new legacy built not on bloodlines and tradition, but on strength earned through suffering, wisdom gained through humiliation, and love discovered in the most unlikely circumstances. As Luna of the Silver Moon Pack, Zoey had traveled an impossible journey from servant to immortal, from scorned Omega to respected queen. But more important than titles or power was the truth she'd learned and now would pass to her son. That worth isn't determined by others' perception, that strength comes from surviving what should have destroyed you, and that sometimes being thrown into the depths is exactly what's needed to discover you were always meant to soar. The pack gathered in celebration that night, howling their joy at the birth of their future alpha. And in the nursery, as Zoey and Achilles kept vigil over their sleeping son, the moonlight streaming through the window caught the last traces of sacred blood's glow beneath her skin, a permanent reminder that sometimes the moment designed to end you becomes the moment that makes you eternal. "I forgave the elders yesterday," Zoey said quietly, watching Phoenix dream. "They're completing their year of service soon. I'm going to reinstate them to the council, with the condition that they spend one day every week working alongside the pack's servants." "That's generous, considering they tried to murder you." "They gave me the greatest gift, even if they didn't mean to. They forced me to discover who I really was." She leaned into Achilles' embrace. "And that discovery led me to everything I have now. You, Phoenix, this life I never imagined possible." "You're remarkable, my Luna. We're remarkable, my Alpha." Outside, the pack's celebration continued, a chorus of howls welcoming the dawn of a new era. An era where a girl who'd scrubbed floors and survived cruelty had risen to become an immortal queen. Where a servant had become a legend. Where the blood that was meant to reject her had instead recognized what everyone else had been blind to see. That true power lies not in bloodlines or birthright, but in the strength to survive, the courage to forgive, and the wisdom to transform pain into purpose. And as the sun rose over the Silver Moon territory, its light fell upon a transformed pack, one that would forever remember the Luna who'd been drowned in sacred blood and emerged immortal. The Luna who'd taught them that every person, regardless of their status, deserves respect, compassion, and the chance to discover their true worth. The lesson was simple but profound. The depths you're thrown into don't determine your destiny. How you rise from them does. And Zoey had risen into light eternal. Did you like the story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, big shout out to our viewers from Fort Wayne, Indiana, USA, Canada, Michigan, London, Queensland, Birmingham, UK, Long Island, New York, Albany, Central Florida, California, Missouri. Thank you for being part of my small, humble community. To our growing viewers, comment below which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching!